Chapter 1. The Slap. Laura Yale tugged at the collar of her regulation white uniform, the starched fabric digging into her collarbone like a punishment. It was 8:17 p.m., and her feet screamed inside the discount black flats she'd bought 3 years ago, back when Leo's diagnosis was just a cough that wouldn't go away. Back before $80,000 in medical debt became her middle name. Laura. Table 12. VIP section. Do not screw this up. Marcus, the floor manager, materialized beside her, his cologne sharp enough to weaponize. Sweat beaded on his upper lip despite the restaurant's Arctic air conditioning. It's the Dowling party. Laura's heart dropped into her stomach like a stone through ice. In this city, you didn't need to read the crime blotter to know about the Dowlings. They were the current running beneath everything, the electricity that powered the underground. And Don Robb Dowling? He was the lightning itself. The kind that struck without warning and left nothing but ash. I've got it, Marcus, Laura said quietly, her voice steadier than her hands. I really need these tips. Leo's treatment is Friday. She didn't mention that treatment meant another round of chemotherapy that insurance had already denied twice. She didn't mention that she'd been awake for 36 hours, pulling a double at a diner in Queens before the shift. She didn't mention anything, because at the Obsidian, waitresses were supposed to be invisible. Laura lifted the heavy silver tray, 3 crystal champagne flutes filled with vintage Krug and a bottle of San Pellegrino that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. She moved through the dining room like smoke, weaving between tables occupied by tech billionaires, Manhattan socialites, and people whose faces she recognized from courtroom sketches. But the air changed as she approached table 12. It was positioned in the back corner, wrapped in calculated shadow and guarded by 3 men in black suits whose bulges under their jackets weren't cell phones. The booth itself looked like a throne carved from darkness. Don Robb Dowling sat at its center. He looked nothing like his grainy newspaper photos. He was younger than she expected, mid-30s, perhaps, with black hair swept back from a face that could have been sculpted from marble if marble could look cruel. He wore a midnight blue suit that fit him like a weapon, tailored to perfection. He wasn't speaking to anyone. He was simply watching the room with the cold, detached interest of a scientist observing bacteria. Beside him sat Linda King. Linda was beautiful the way a knife was beautiful, sleek, sharp, and designed to cut. Her red dress clung to her like liquid fire, and a diamond choker wrapped her throat like a glittering noose. She radiated the kind of confidence that came from never being told no in her entire privileged life. Currently, she was examining her manicure with exaggerated boredom. Your champagne, Mr. Dowling, Miss King, Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper. Don Robb didn't acknowledge her existence. He simply tapped one finger against the white tablecloth. Once, twice. A dismissal. An acceptance. She couldn't tell which. Linda, however, sighed with theatrical exasperation. Finally. Did you have to age it another year while we waited? Laura forced her face into something resembling a smile. My apologies for any delay, Miss King. She placed the first flute in front of Don Robb with surgical precision. Then she reached across to set Linda's glass down. And that's when it happened. Laura's foot, exhausted and clumsy from 16 hours on her feet, came down wrong. The worn sole of her cheap shoe caught the edge of something. A purse strap, a leg, she'd never know, and she stumbled forward. Her hand shot out instinctively to catch herself, and landed directly on Linda King's shoe. Not just any shoe. A crimson Louboutin pump that probably cost more than Laura's entire year's salary. Time stopped. Laura looked down in horror at her palm pressed against the glossy leather, at the faint scuff mark her hand had left on the pristine surface. You. Linda's voice was barely a whisper, strangled by rage. You touched my shoe. I'm so sorry, Miss King. Laura never got to finish. Linda's hand came out of nowhere. A backhanded strike powered by fury and a 5-carat engagement ring that caught the chandelier light like a falling star. The slap connected with Laura's cheekbone with enough force to snap her head sideways. Pain exploded across her face, white-hot and blinding. The tray flew from her hands, crystal shattering as it hit the floor in a cascade of sound that seemed to go on forever. Laura stumbled, her knees buckling. She caught herself on the edge of a nearby chair, hand pressed to her face, tasting blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her cheek. The entire restaurant had gone silent. The jazz trio stopped mid-note. Conversations died. Even the kitchen seemed to hold its breath. "You clumsy, pathetic little rat," Linda hissed, rising from her seat like an avenging goddess. "Do you have any idea what these shoes cost? More than you'll make in your entire worthless life." Laura couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except kneel there on the floor among the broken glass and spilled champagne, her cheek throbbing, her career ending, her brother's treatment evaporating before her eyes. This was it. This was how she disappeared. Because she'd offended Linda King. Because Linda King belonged to Don Robb Dowling. Because in this city, you didn't survive mistakes like that. She could feel Don Robb's eyes on her now. Could feel the weight of his attention like a physical thing, cold and suffocating. Laura waited for the order. For security to drag her away. For the concrete. But then, Don Robb Dowling stood up. And the entire obsidian held its breath. Chapter 2. The Intervention. Don Robb Dowling didn't move quickly. He didn't need to. He simply reached out and caught Linda's wrist mid-swing, her arm frozen in the air as she prepared to deliver another blow. His grip was casual, almost gentle, but Linda's face went white. She tugged once, testing, and found herself completely immobilized. "That's enough," Don Robb said. His voice was quiet, conversational even, but it carried through the silent restaurant like a death sentence. Linda's eyes went wide. "Robb, darling, she ruined my shoes. I said enough." He released her wrist, and Linda stumbled backward, cradling her arm against her chest. Don Robb's ice blue eyes swept across the restaurant, landing on Marcus, who looked like he might vomit. "Manager." Marcus practically ran to the table, his face the color of spoiled milk. "Yes, Mr. Dowling, sir. I am so deeply sorry for this incident. We will of course terminate." "You'll do nothing of the sort." Don Robb's gaze dropped to Laura, still kneeling on the floor among the shattered crystal. She felt his eyes on her like the barrel of a gun. "This waitress. What's her name?" "Laura Yale, sir," Marcus stammered. "Laura Yale works here tomorrow. And the day after that. And every day after that until she decides otherwise." Don Robb turned back to Marcus, and something in his expression made the manager take an involuntary step backward. "If I hear she's been fired, disciplined, or even looked at wrong, I will buy this restaurant. And then I will burn it to the ground with you inside it. Are we clear?" Marcus nodded so hard Laura thought his head might fall off. "Crystal clear, Mr. Dowling, sir." "Robb." Linda's voice was shrill now, desperate. "What are you doing? She assaulted my property. Don Robb finally looked at Linda. Really looked at her. And whatever she saw, Don Robb Dowling sat in the back seat, still wearing that immaculate midnight suit, looking like he'd been carved from shadows and old money. Laura's legs locked. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed at her to run. I should get home. My brother. Leo. Age 16. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, diagnosed 14 months ago. Currently at Mount Sinai's Pediatric Oncology Ward under Dr. Sarah Chen's care. Don Robb's voice was clinical, detached. "He's stable tonight. I checked. The world tilted sideways. How do you? Laura's voice came out as a whisper. How do you know my brother's name? Get in the car, Laura. We need to talk. And you need medical attention. He gestured to her face. That bruise is going to get worse before it gets better. I can't afford. I'm not asking you to. Something flickered in those ice blue eyes. Impatience, maybe. Or amusement. Get in the car. Please. The please was what did it. It sounded so wrong coming from him, so foreign, that Laura found herself moving before she'd consciously decided to. She slid into the limousine, the leather seat swallowing her whole. The door closed with a heavy thunk, sealing her in. The interior smelled like expensive whiskey and something darker, gunpowder, maybe. Or money. They smelled similar. Don Robb pressed a button, and a privacy screen rose between them and the driver. Then he reached into a built-in ice bucket and pulled out a cloth napkin filled with ice, handing it to her without a word. Laura pressed it to her cheek, the cold shocking against her heated skin. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere private. The limo pulled away from the curb, gliding through Manhattan traffic like it owned the streets. Which, Laura supposed, it probably did. You should know I don't make a habit of rescuing waitresses. I didn't ask you to rescue me. No. He turned to look at her fully for the first time, and Laura felt pinned by that gaze like a butterfly under glass. But you would have been fired. Blacklisted. You'd never work in a restaurant in this city again. And then how would you pay for Leo's treatment? There it was again. Leo's name in this stranger's mouth. Why do you know so much about me? Laura asked, her voice sharper than she'd intended. Fear made her bold or maybe stupid. Did you have me investigated? Yes. He said it like he was commenting on the weather. 3 weeks ago. You've lost 14 pounds since Leo's diagnosis. You work 3 jobs, the Obsidian, a diner in Queens, and weekend shifts at a call center. You sleep an average of 4 hours a night. You check your phone every 7 minutes when you're on shift, waiting for updates from the hospital. And you're drowning in medical debt you'll never be able to pay off. Laura's hands went numb. The ice pack slipped from her fingers. You're insane, she breathed. You're actually insane. Probably. Don Robb leaned back against the leather seat, completely relaxed. But I'm also the only person in this city who can save your brother's life. Chapter 3. The Proposition. The limousine pulled up to a nondescript building in Midtown, all glass and steel and anonymous wealth. Don Robb led her through a private entrance, past security guards who nodded without speaking, into an elevator that required a fingerprint to operate. They emerged into what looked like a private medical suite, all white walls and gleaming equipment and the antiseptic smell of money-fueled healthcare. A doctor appeared within seconds, a silver-haired woman in an immaculate white coat who examined Laura's face with gentle, professional hands and asked no questions about how she'd been injured. She cleaned the wound, applied something that numbed the pain, and pronounced that nothing was broken. Ice for 48 hours, the doctor said. Arnica gel for the bruising. It'll heal clean. She handed Laura a small bag of supplies and disappeared as quickly as she'd come. Laura stood in the middle of the pristine examination room, holding a bag of expensive medical supplies, and felt reality fragmenting around her. Why are you doing this? She asked when she and Don Robb were alone again. He was standing by the window, looking out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. Because I need something from you. I have nothing you could possibly want. You'd be surprised. He turned to face her, and in the harsh medical lighting, she could see him clearly for the first time. He was younger than she'd thought, and there were shadows under his eyes that no amount of expensive tailoring could hide. He looked like a man who hadn't slept well in years. How much do you know about my reputation, Laura? I know you're a criminal, she said bluntly. I know people are afraid of you. I know you're called the Ice King because you're supposed to be cold and ruthless and I bury my enemies in concrete. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just all true. What else? I don't understand what this has to do with your brother's medical debt. $80,312 as of this morning. Owed to Mount Sinai, with collections proceedings starting next week. Don Robb pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and held it out to her. It's gone. Laura stared at the screen. It showed a hospital billing portal with Leo's name at the top. Where there should have been a massive number in red, there was now a single line. Balance, $0. Paid in full. No. Laura shook her head, backing away. No, you can't. You didn't? I bought your debt this morning, Don Robb said calmly, pocketing his phone. 8 a.m., to be precise. Right before I instructed my fiancé to make reservations at the Obsidian so I could meet you properly. The room spun. Laura grabbed the examination table to steady herself. You planned this? All of it? Linda slapping me, you defending me, the debt? Not the slapping. That was Linda being Linda. He moved closer, and Laura could smell that expensive cologne mixed with something sharper. Danger. But yes, I plan to meet you. I plan to put myself in a position where you would be grateful to me. I plan to own your debt so that you would have no choice but to listen to what I'm about to offer you. You're a monster, Laura whispered. Yes. He didn't even pretend to deny it. But I'm a monster who just saved your brother's life. Mount Sinai was about to drop Leo from their treatment program. Did you know that? Next week, they were going to transfer him to a county hospital with a 6-month waiting list for chemotherapy. Leo doesn't have 6 months, Laura. Tears burned in Laura's eyes. She'd known they were running out of time, but hearing it stated so baldly, so clinically, what do you want from me? Her voice broke. What could I possibly give you? Don Robb reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. He set it on the examination table between them. I want you to be my fiancé. Publicly. For 1 year. You'll live in my home, attend events at my side, and play the role of the woman who tamed the Ice King. He gestured to the document. In exchange, Leo receives the best cancer treatment money can buy. A private suite at Mount Sinai, access to experimental therapies, the top pediatric oncologists in the country. Everything he needs to survive. Laura stared at him. But why would you possibly? Because I need to rehabilitate my image. My business interests require a certain level of legitimacy that I currently lack. A beautiful, sympathetic fiancée, a waitress who I rescued from humiliation, a devoted sister caring for her sick brother. That's the kind of story that softens edges. Makes me look human. His eyes were flat. Empty. It's a business acquisition, Laura. Nothing more. And if I say no? Then Leo's debt comes due. Collections proceeds. Mount Sinai drops him from treatment. And you go back to working yourself to death for nothing. He paused. But you won't say no. Because you'd do anything for your brother. I've been watching you long enough to know that. Laura's hands trembled as she picked up the document. The words swam before her eyes. Cohabitation agreement. Engagement terms. Termination clause. 1 year of her life in exchange for Leo's survival. 1 year as the property of a monster. I need to think about it, she said. You have until tomorrow morning. Don Robb moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, Laura, I won't hurt you. I won't touch you. This is purely business. You play your part, I play mine, and at the end of the year, you walk away with your brother alive and healthy and a very generous severance package. It's not a bad deal. It's a prison sentence. Perhaps. He opened the door. But it's a prison sentence that keeps Leo alive. And we both know you've already made your choice. The door closed behind him, leaving Laura alone in the sterile white room with a contract that would sell her soul. Chapter 4. The Diagnosis. Laura didn't go home that night. She couldn't face Leo, couldn't let him see her bruised face and haunted eyes and know that something terrible had happened. Instead, she took the subway to a 24-hour diner in Queens and sat in a corner booth, nursing coffee that tasted like ashes while she read the contract over and over. It was thorough, brutally thorough. She would live in Don Robb's primary residence. She would attend all required social functions. She would portray herself as a willing, loving fiancée. She would give interviews to carefully selected media outlets. She would wear the clothes he provided, follow the schedule his people created, and smile for the cameras. In exchange, Leo would receive unlimited medical care for the duration of the agreement and for 5 years after its termination. She would receive a monthly stipend of $10,000, all of which could be saved or sent to Leo. And at the end of the year, assuming she fulfilled all terms, she would receive a lump sum payment of $500,000. It was more money than she'd see in 10 lifetimes of waitressing. It was also a cage with golden bars. She was still sitting there when her phone rang at 6:47 a.m. Mount Sinai. Laura's heart stopped. "Miss Yale? This is Dr. Chin. I wanted to update you on Leo's status. Is he okay?" Laura's voice cracked. "Did something happen?" "Leo is stable," Dr. Chin said quickly. "But I need to discuss his treatment plan with you. Can you come to the hospital this morning?" Laura made it to Mount Sinai by 7:30, running on no sleep and cold coffee and terror. She found Dr. Chin in her office, looking tired and sympathetic in a way that made Laura's stomach drop. "Leo's latest scans came back," Dr. Chin said gently. "The leukemia is progressing faster than we'd hoped. We need to move to more aggressive treatment, but—" She hesitated. "Miss Yale, your insurance has reached its maximum payout. The hospital has been absorbing costs, but we can't continue to do that indefinitely. I'm afraid we're going to have to transfer Leo to hospice." The word fell out of Laura's mouth like poison. Dr. Chen's expression was answer enough. Laura stood in that office, surrounded by diplomas and medical journals and evidence of a woman who dedicated her life to saving children and felt her world end. "How long?" she whispered. "Without treatment?" 3 to 6 months. "With aggressive treatment." Dr. Chin spread her hands helplessly. "He could have years. But Miss Yale, the cost." "I'll get the money." Laura's voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere far away. "I'll figure it out. Just don't give up on him yet. Please." She left the hospital in a daze, Dr. Chen's words echoing in her skull. 3 to 6 months. Hospice. Give up. Laura pulled out her phone with shaking hands. The business card Don Robb had slipped into her jacket pocket last night had a single phone number printed on it. No name. No title. Just 10 digits that represented a deal with the devil. She dialed before she could change her mind. He answered on the first ring. "Laura." "I'll do it." Her voice was hollow. "I'll sign your contract. I'll be your fiancé. I'll do whatever you want. Just save my brother." There was a pause. "Then, I'll send a car to pick you up. 1 hour. We have a lot to do." "One condition," Laura said. She was surprised her voice still worked. "Leo can never know. He can never know what I gave up for him. As far as he's concerned, I fell in love with you. This is real. Do you understand?" "Yes." Something in Don Robb's voice softened, just for a moment. Almost human. "I understand. Then we have a deal." Laura ended the call and stood on the sidewalk outside Mount Sinai, watching the morning sun rise over Manhattan. Somewhere in that hospital, her brother was sleeping, unaware that his sister had just sold herself to save his life. She'd made her choice. She'd chosen Leo, the way she always chose Leo. Even if it meant belonging to a monster. Even if it meant losing herself completely. The black limousine pulled up exactly 1 hour later, sleek and predatory and waiting to swallow her whole. Laura Yale took one last breath of freedom and stepped inside. Chapter 5. The Contract. The limousine didn't take her home. Instead, it glided through morning traffic toward Lower Manhattan, where the buildings grew taller and the air itself seemed to cost more. Laura sat in silence, watching the city pass by through tinted windows, feeling like she was already a ghost. The car pulled up to a gleaming tower of black glass and steel that seemed to swallow the sky. Gold letters near the top spelled out Dowling Enterprises in a font that looked like it could cut you. The building was a monolith, cold and imposing, the kind of structure that made people feel small just by existing. "This way, Miss Yale." A woman in a severe black suit was waiting at a private entrance, her expression neutral and professional. She led Laura through a marble lobby where their footsteps echoed like gunshots, past security that looked more military than civilian, into an elevator that required both a key card and a retinal scan. They rose in silence. Laura watched the floor numbers climb, 20, 30, 40, until they stopped at 52. The top floor. The doors opened directly into an office that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked all of Manhattan, giving the impression that Don Robb Dowling owned everything the light touched. The furniture was minimalist and expensive, all sharp angles and dark wood. Everything was precise, controlled, cold. Don Robb stood by the windows, silhouetted against the morning sun. He'd changed into a different suit, charcoal gray this time, perfectly tailored. He turned as Laura entered, and she saw that he looked exactly the same as he had hours ago. Unwrinkled, unmoved, as if he hadn't slept, but also didn't need to. "Miss Yale." He gestured to a conference table where several documents waited in neat stacks. "Please sit." Laura's legs felt like water, but she made it to the chair. The woman who'd escorted her disappeared, leaving them alone in this glass castle above the city. A man in an expensive suit materialized from a side door. A lawyer, Laura realized, from the way he carried a leather briefcase like it contained the secrets of the universe. He was older, silver-haired, with the kind of face that had witnessed too many dark transactions to be shocked by anything. "This is Bernard Hayes," Don Robb said. "He'll witness the contract and notarize it. Everything will be legally binding." Bernard nodded to Laura with professional courtesy, then began laying out documents with practiced efficiency. The cohabitation and engagement agreement was thicker than Laura had expected, easily 50 pages of dense legal text. "I've taken the liberty of having my attorney review the terms," Don Robb said, sitting across from her. "Everything we discussed is in writing. Leo's medical care, your compensation, the duration of the agreement, and the termination clause. Read it carefully. I want you to understand exactly what you're agreeing to." Laura's hands shook as she picked up the first page. The words swam before her eyes. "The engaged party, hereinafter Miss Yale, agrees to cohabitate with the acquiring party, hereinafter Mr. Dowling, for a period of 12 months. Page 17 covers Leo's medical care," Don Robb said quietly. "Page 23 outlines your financial compensation. Page 31 details the public appearances you'll be expected to make. Take your time." But Laura couldn't take her time. Because somewhere across the city, Leo was lying in a hospital bed, and Dr. Chen was probably already making calls to hospice facilities. Every minute she delayed was another minute her brother moved closer to death. She flipped to page 17. The medical coverage was comprehensive: unlimited treatment, experimental therapies, private suite, 24-hour nursing care, continuation of benefits for 5 years post-termination. It was more than she'd dared to hope for. It was everything. Page 23 showed the money. $10,000 monthly, $500,000 at termination. Numbers that made her head spin. Page 31 made her stomach turn. Asterisk, Miss Yale will attend all required social functions including but not limited to charity galas, business dinners, family gatherings, and media appearances. She will present herself as Mr. Dowling's willing and devoted fiancée at all times. Public displays of affection may be required, asterisk. I won't force myself on you, Don Robb said, as if reading her mind. The physical contact will be minimal and only in public when necessary to maintain the illusion. You'll have your own bedroom, your own space. This is a performance, Laura. Nothing more. She looked up at him. And if I fail to perform? If I can't convince people? Then you're in breach of contract, and Leo's medical coverage terminates immediately. His voice was matter-of-fact. Clinical. But you won't fail. You're desperate enough to be convincing. It should have sounded cruel. It was cruel. But it was also honest in a way that made something inside Laura break and reform into something harder. Where do I sign? Bernard produced a pen. Heavy, expensive, the kind of pen used to sign away souls. Laura took it, and the weight of it felt like holding her own execution order. She signed on page 50, then initialed 47 other places where Bernard's finger pointed. Each mark felt like another piece of herself being carved away, sold off, consumed. When it was done, Bernard collected the documents with efficient finality. Congratulations on your engagement, he said with the blandness of someone who'd witnessed far stranger transactions. Then he was gone, leaving Laura alone with her new owner. Don Robb stood and moved to a wall safe hidden behind a painting of something dark and abstract. He pressed his thumb to a scanner, and the safe opened with a quiet hiss. He removed a small velvet box. Laura's heart stopped. This belonged to my grandmother, Don Robb said, returning to the table. He opened the box, and Laura's breath caught. The ring inside was obscene, a diamond the size of a quail's egg, surrounded by smaller stones that caught the morning light and shattered it into 1,000 fragments. It looked heavy. It looked expensive. It looked like a shackle made of ice and fire. Give me your hand. Laura extended her left hand, and it trembled so badly she almost pulled it back. But Don Robb caught her wrist, gently but firmly, and slid the ring onto her fourth finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He'd planned everything. The weight of it was immediate and overwhelming. Laura stared at her own hand like it belonged to a stranger. The diamond caught the light, sending rainbow refractions across the dark wood of the table. It was beautiful in the way that weapons were beautiful, deadly and precise and designed to make a statement. This ring cost more than most people make in a lifetime, Don Robb said quietly. It's insured for $3 million. You're not to remove it unless I tell you to. It's a symbol or, to the world, you belong to me now. She wanted to throw the ring back in his face. Wanted to run. But instead, she just stared at the glittering shackle on her finger and thought about Leo. When do I move in? Her voice sounded hollow. Today. My people will collect your things from your apartment. You'll say goodbye to Leo this afternoon. Tell him you've fallen in love, that this is sudden but real. Can you do that? I can lie to my dying brother for you. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Yes, I can do that. Something flickered in Don Robb's eyes. Regret, maybe? Or just calculation. Good. Because we're having dinner tonight with my business associates. I need them to believe this is real. I need them to see that the Ice King has melted. He moved back to the windows, his silhouette dark against the bright city. Your performance starts immediately. Laura stood, the ring heavy on her finger like a ball and chain. Is there anything else? Yes. Don Robb didn't turn around. Thank you for choosing Leo's life over your pride. I know that doesn't make this easier, but it matters. It was the closest thing to kindness he'd shown her, and somehow that made it worse. Chapter 6: The Lies. The afternoon passed in a blur of humiliation and necessity. Don Robb's people descended on her tiny apartment like a team of professional burglars, packing her pathetic belongings into boxes with terrifying efficiency. They didn't comment on the second-hand furniture or the empty refrigerator or the stack of past-due bills on the kitchen counter. They just worked with silent, judgmental competence. Laura stood in the hospital hallway outside Leo's room, trying to compose herself, trying to figure out how to sell the biggest lie of her life to the person who knew her best. She pushed open the door. Leo was awake, sitting up in bed with his laptop balanced on his knees. He looked up when she entered, and his face lit up, then immediately fell when he saw her bruise. "Laura, what happened to your face?" He was out of bed in seconds, 16 years old and too thin, his hospital gown hanging off his shoulders. The four-pole followed him like a loyal dog. "It's nothing," Laura said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just a stupid accident at work. I'm fine." Leo touched her cheek gently, his fingers cold. "This doesn't look like nothing. I promise it's not as bad as it looks." She took his hand and led him back to bed, tucking him in like she'd done 1,000 times before. "Actually, something happened last night. Something good." Leo's eyes narrowed. "You're using your don't freak out voice. What happened?" Laura took a deep breath and showed him her left hand. Leo stared at the ring, then at her face, then back at the ring. "Is that real?" he whispered. "Yes." That's huge." Understanding dawned across his face, followed by confusion. "Wait, you're not seeing anyone? Unless, did you meet someone?" "His name is Robb." The lie tasted like poison, but Laura forced it out. "Robb Dowling. He was at the restaurant last night. He defended me when a customer got aggressive. That's how I got the bruise. And we connected. I know it sounds crazy, Leah. I know it's fast. But he's Dowling." Leo's eyes went wide. "As in Dowling Enterprises?" "Laura, that guy is rich and powerful." "I know." Laura squeezed his hand. "But he's also good to me. And he wants to help. He's going to make sure you get the best treatment, Leo. Everything you need. You don't have to worry about money anymore." Leo pulled his hand away, his expression hardening in that stubborn way that reminded her of their father. No, I don't want his charity." "Laura, you can't. It's not charity. It's family." She touched the ring, hating how easily the lies came now. "He wants to take care of both of us. That's what people do when they love each other." "You don't love him." Leo's voice was flat. "Certain. You can't. You just met him." "Sometimes you just know," Laura said, and the irony of it made her want to scream. "I know it's sudden. I know it seems impossible. But Leo, this is real. And I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Leo stared at her for a long moment, and Laura saw the war happening behind his eyes, suspicion fighting with desperate hope. He was 16 and dying, and he wanted to believe that something good could happen. "Does he make you happy?" Leo asked finally. "Yes," Laura lied and smiled through her breaking heart. "He makes me very happy." Leo was quiet for a moment, then reached out and pulled her into a hug. "If you're happy, then I'm happy." He pulled back and there were tears in his eyes. "But if he hurts you, I don't care how rich or powerful he is. I'll find a way to make him pay." Laura laughed, even though she wanted to cry. "Deal." She stayed with Leo for another hour, letting him ask questions about Robb, about the engagement, about their future. She answered each one with carefully constructed lies, building a fairy tale on top of a nightmare. By the time she left, Leo was smiling, actually smiling, talking about being well enough to attend the wedding. Laura made it to the elevator before the tears came. That evening, Laura found herself in the back of the limousine again, wearing a dress that cost more than her monthly rent. It was deep emerald green, elegant and simple, with a neckline that showed just enough to be tasteful. Don Robb's people had delivered an entire wardrobe to what was now her room in his penthouse. Clothes that fit her perfectly, shoes that didn't hurt, jewelry that made her feel like a very expensive doll. Don Robb sat across from her, looking at something on his phone. He'd barely spoken since they'd left his building. "Where are we going?" Laura asked. "Brooklyn. A restaurant in Red Hook. Some of my associates are meeting us there." He looked up, and his expression was unreadable. "These are dangerous men, Laura. Play your part, smile when appropriate, and don't ask questions about the business. Understood?" "Understood." The restaurant was called Constantine's, and it looked like the kind of place where people went to have conversations they didn't want recorded. The interior was all dark wood and red leather, with private booths separated by heavy curtains. The air smelled like expensive wine and old secrets. They were led to a booth in the back, where 3 men were already waiting. They looked exactly like what they were, criminals wearing expensive suits like wolves in tailored clothing. They stood when Don Robb and Laura approached, their eyes sizing her up with predatory interest. "Gentlemen," Don Robb said smoothly, "this is my fiancée, Laura Yale. Laura, this is Victor Kozlov, Marcus Chin, and James Sullivan. Old friends." They shook her hand one by one, their grips ranging from perfunctory to slightly too long. Laura smiled and played her part, letting Don Robb's hand rest on the small of her back in a gesture of possession that made her skin crawl. Victor Kozlov was the first to speak, his accent thick and Russian. "So this is the woman who tamed the Ice King. I didn't believe the rumors, Robb. But here she is." "Here she is," Don Robb agreed, his voice warm in a way Laura had never heard before. It was unsettling how easily he played the role of devoted fiancé. "How did you two meet?" Marcus Chin asked, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. Laura opened her mouth, but Don Robb spoke first. "She was working at the Obsidian. My former fiancé was unkind to her. I intervened. And the moment I looked into Laura's eyes, I knew." He turned to her, and the intensity in his gaze was so convincing that Laura almost believed it herself. "I knew she was the one." James Sullivan raised his glass. "To love at first sight, then, and to the Ice King finally finding someone warm enough to melt him." They all drank. Laura forced the wine down her throat, tasting nothing but the metallic tang of her own fear. The dinner continued with small talk and veiled business discussions that Laura tried not to listen to too closely. She smiled when appropriate, laughed at jokes she didn't understand, and let Don Robb's hand occasionally find hers under the table. Each touch felt like a brand. They'd been there maybe 40 minutes when Don Robb's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something changed in his face, a flicker of something dark and dangerous. "Excuse me," he said, standing abruptly. "I need to take this." He stepped away from the table, phone pressed to his ear. Laura watched him through the gauzy curtain, watched his posture shift from relaxed to rigid, watched his free hand curl into a fist. When he returned, his expression was carved from ice. "We need to leave. Now." He took Laura's arm, not roughly but with absolute finality. "Gentlemen, apologies. A situation has developed." Victor Kozlov leaned back in his seat, swirling his vodka. "What kind of situation, Robb?" "The kind that requires my immediate attention." Don Robb's voice was flat. Cold. The temperature in the booth seemed to drop 10 degrees. "We'll reschedule." They were in the limousine 30 seconds later, and Don Robb was making calls in rapid succession, his voice clipped and controlled. Chapter 7. Dinner Interrupted. How many dead? Don Robb asked someone on the phone. The pause. And the shipment? Another pause, longer this time. Burn the warehouse. I want it reduced to ash by morning. No, I don't care about the loss. I care about sending a message. He ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Vincent. Gather everyone. High alert. I want a perimeter around every asset we have. Yes, everyone. I don't care if they're off duty. Laura pressed herself against the leather seat, trying to make herself invisible. This was the real Don Robb Dowling, not the controlled businessman or the calculated suitor. This was the man who buried people in concrete. He made 3 more calls before he finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her stop breathing. The Russians hit one of my warehouses in the Bronx, he said quietly. 4 of my men are dead. This is war, Laura. I don't understand. You don't need to understand. You need to do exactly what I tell you. The limousine was moving fast now, weaving through traffic with the kind of aggressive driving that suggested the driver knew people were trying to kill them. We're going to my estate in the Hudson Valley. It's fortified. Secure. You'll be safe there. Safe from what? From my enemies. He leaned forward, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something like concern in his face. If they know about you, and they will know about you after tonight, then you're a target. You're leverage against me. Do you understand? Laura's hands went numb. I thought this was just supposed to be pretend. I thought. Nothing about my life is pretend. Don Robb's voice was hard. You're mine now, which means you're a target. That ring on your finger is a bullseye. Welcome to my world, Laura. I hope Leo's life was worth it. The words hit her like a physical blow. Laura stared at him, at this man who'd bought her like property, and felt the full weight of what she'd agreed to. You knew this would happen, she said quietly. You knew I'd be in danger. I knew it was a possibility. He didn't look away. Didn't flinch. But Leo would be dead within 3 months without my help. So you tell me, Laura, was it worth the risk? She wanted to scream at him. Wanted to demand he take her back to the city, to safety, to anywhere but here. But instead, she just stared at the diamond on her finger and thought about Leo's smile when she'd told him she was happy. Yes, she whispered. It was worth it. Something flickered in Don Robb's eyes. Respect, maybe, or just grim satisfaction. But then hold on. We have a long drive ahead of us. The limousine sped north through the night, leaving the city lights behind. Don Robb made call after call, his voice never rising above conversational but carrying a weight that made Laura understand why people feared him. He was orchestrating a war from the back of a car, and he did it with the casual efficiency of someone ordering coffee. Laura watched the darkness pass by outside the tinted windows and wondered if this was what it felt like to be swallowed whole. Chapter 8. The Fortress. The Hudson Valley estate was less a home and more a fortress pretending to be one. High walls. Armed guards. Security cameras every 10 feet. The main house was massive, stone and steel and bulletproof glass, built like something that expected to withstand a siege. The limousine passed through 3 separate checkpoints before pulling up to the entrance. At each one, guards in tactical gear examined the vehicle with mirrors and bomb-sniffing equipment before waving them through. Laura counted at least a dozen armed men patrolling the grounds, their movements coordinated and professional. Don Robb was on the phone the entire drive, speaking in clipped sentences that Laura couldn't fully follow. Words like perimeter, armory, and extraction protocol filtered through his conversations. By the time they arrived, night had fallen completely, and the estate was lit up like a prison. Vincent will show you to the master suite, Don Robb said as they exited the car. The man who'd been his head of security at the restaurant appeared, armed and alert. "You're not to leave that room without an escort. There will be guards posted outside your door at all times." "I'm a prisoner," Laura said flatly. "You're protected." Don Robb's eyes were hard. "There's a difference. Vincent, take her upstairs. Make sure she has everything she needs." Vincent nodded and gestured for Laura to follow. They entered through a grand foyer that looked like it belonged in a Gothic cathedral, all dark wood and dramatic lighting and shadows that seemed to move on their own. The ceilings soared overhead, and their footsteps echoed against marble floors that probably cost more than her childhood home. The master suite was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a long hallway lined with doors that Laura suspected led to panic rooms and armories. Vincent unlocked the door with both a key and a thumbprint scanner. The room beyond was enormous, more like an apartment than a bedroom. King-sized bed with black silk sheets, sitting area with leather furniture, bathroom that looked like a luxury spa. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the estate grounds, currently swarming with security personnel. "You have a panic button here." Vincent pointed to a red button on the nightstand. "And here, another one by the door. If anyone enters this room who isn't Mr. Dowling or myself, you press it. Understood?" Laura nodded, too numb to speak. "There's food in the mini fridge. Phone on the nightstand has a direct line to security. Don't try to leave." His voice softened slightly. "It's for your own safety, Miss Yale." Then he was gone, and Laura heard the lock click from the outside. She stood in the middle of the luxurious prison and felt the full weight of her decision crash down on her. She'd sold herself to save Leo, but she hadn't considered what that sale actually meant. She was property now, a commodity to be protected and locked away and owned. The diamond ring on her finger caught the light, mocking her. Laura walked to the windows and looked out at the fortress grounds. Armed men patrolled in pairs. Lights swept the perimeter. Somewhere in the darkness, people were trying to kill the man she'd bound herself to for a year. She'd made a deal with the devil, and now she was living in hell. Laura explored her cage with the methodical detachment of someone cataloging a crime scene. The bathroom had heated floors and a shower with more settings than her old car had. The closet was already stocked with clothes in her exact size. More clothes than she'd owned in her entire life. The mini fridge contained gourmet food she didn't recognize, each item probably costing more than a week of groceries. Everything was perfect. Everything was expensive. Everything was a gilded bar on her prison cell. She found herself back at the windows, staring out at the darkness. In the distance, she could see the lights of what might have been a gatehouse or a guard tower. Closer in, men in tactical gear moved in coordinated patterns, their weapons visible even from this distance. What had she gotten herself into? The phone on the nightstand rang, making her jump. She stared at it for 3 rings before picking up. "Yes. It's Vincent. Mr. Dowling wanted me to inform you that the situation is under control. You're safe." "Safe," Laura repeated hollowly. "Right. If you need anything, press 0. Someone will respond immediately." The pause. "Try to get some rest, Miss Yale. Tomorrow will be a long day." He hung up before she could respond. Laura set the phone down and looked at the massive bed with its expensive sheets. She couldn't remember the last time she'd slept in a bed this nice. Couldn't remember the last time she'd had her own bathroom, her own space, her own anything. But it wasn't hers. None of it was hers. It all belonged to Don Robb Dowling, just like she did. She must have dozed off on the leather sofa, still wearing the emerald dress, because she woke to the sound of the door unlocking. She jerked upright, heart hammering, reaching instinctively for the panic button. "It's me." Chapter 9, Blood and Truth. Don Robb stood in the doorway, and he looked like he'd walked through a war zone. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was torn and splattered with blood, some of it dried to rust, some of it still wet. His face was cut, a thin line above his left eyebrow that had bled down his temple. His hands were bruised and bloody, knuckles split like he'd been hitting something, or someone, with his bare fists. Laura's breath caught. "What happened to you?" "Russians." He stepped into the room and locked the door behind him with a heavy finality. "They made another move. We pushed back. It's handled." "You're bleeding." "I'm fine." But he swayed slightly, catching himself on the doorframe. Now that she looked closer, Laura could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he was holding his left side like something hurt. Against every instinct telling her to stay away, Laura stood and moved toward him. "You need medical attention." "I need a shower and 3 hours of sleep." But he didn't move. He just stood there, staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Blood dripped slowly from his hand onto the expensive carpet. "I came to tell you something." "What?" "There's a traitor in my organization." He said it flatly, like he was discussing the weather. "Someone close to me. Someone who knew about the Bronx warehouse, knew about my schedule tonight, knew exactly where to hit us. That's how they keep getting through my security. I'm being betrayed by my own people." Laura's throat went dry. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the only person I can trust." He moved into the room, limping slightly, and Laura saw the full extent of his injuries. The blood, the bruises, the exhaustion that went bone deep. "Do you want to know why I bought your debt, Laura? Why I went through all this trouble?" "To rehabilitate your image." "You said?" "That's part of it. But the real reason—" He stopped a few feet away from her, close enough that she could smell the copper scent of blood mixed with his expensive cologne. "I needed someone who belongs to me completely. Someone who has no allegiances to my world, no connections to my enemies, no reason to betray me except to save the thing they love most." Understanding hit her like cold water. "You own Leo's life," she whispered. "So you own me." "Yes." There was no apology in his voice. No shame. "Everyone else around me wants something: power, money, territory. They're all potential enemies. But you hate me. You hate my world. The only thing you care about is your brother's survival. Which means I can trust you in ways I can't trust anyone else." He moved closer, and Laura found herself backing up until she hit the window. Don Robb followed, bracketing her in with one bloody hand pressed against the glass beside her head. Up close, she could see the cuts on his face more clearly, the way his pupils were slightly dilated. He smelled like violence and expensive cologne and something darker. Fear, maybe, though she'd never have guessed he was capable of it. "You're the safest person in my life," he said quietly, his voice rough with exhaustion, "because I own the only thing that matters to you. You won't betray me. You won't sell me out. You'll do exactly what I need you to do, because if you don't, Leo dies." Laura stared up at him, at this man who'd orchestrated her entire life, and felt something inside her shift. Not acceptance. Not surrender. But a kind of cold, clarifying rage. "You're right," she said softly. "I do hate you. And I'll play my part perfectly, because you've made sure I have no choice. But don't mistake obedience for loyalty, Mr. Dowling. I'm your prisoner, not your ally." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or just exhaustion. "Good. That's exactly what I need." He stepped back, wincing as the movement pulled at whatever injury he was hiding. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we have a press conference to announce our engagement. I need you perfect." He turned toward the door, and Laura heard herself say, "You should let someone look at those injuries." He paused, glancing back at her over his shoulder. "Concerned for your investment? Concerned that if you die, my contract becomes worthless and Leo loses his treatment. It was a lie. She was concerned, and she hated herself for it. Hated that some part of her still possessed basic human empathy, even for a monster. A ghost of a smile touched his bloody lips. Fair enough. He unlocked the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, Laura, I meant what I said. I won't hurt you. This arrangement doesn't have to be unbearable. It already is, she said quietly. The smile faded. Then we both suffer. But at least Leo lives. That has to count for something. He turned to leave again, but Laura found herself speaking before she could stop herself. Why are you really doing this? The image rehabilitation story doesn't explain everything. There's something else. Don Robb was silent for a long moment, his hand on the doorknob. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. My father built this empire on fear. When he died, I inherited that fear. But fear only works for so long, Laura. Eventually, people get tired of being afraid. They start looking for weaknesses. They start thinking maybe the monster isn't as invincible as he seems. He looked back at her, and in the low light, he looked younger. Vulnerable. I need to be more than just the Ice King. I need to be human. Relatable. Someone they can't justify killing because the public loves me. That's what you give me. A redemption arc. So I'm your shield, Laura said. Yes. But I'm also yours. Anyone who comes after you has to go through me first. In this world, that's worth something. He opened the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow, the world meets the woman who melted the Ice King's heart. The door closed behind him, and Laura heard the lock click into place again. She slid down the window until she was sitting on the floor, the massive diamond on her finger catching the moonlight streaming through the glass. Her emerald dress pooled around her like spilled paint. Somewhere in this fortress, a monster was nursing his wounds. Somewhere in Manhattan, her brother was sleeping peacefully, unaware that his sister had become a possession. Laura pressed her forehead against her knees and let herself feel the full weight of her cage, golden bars and all. She'd made her choice. She'd chosen Leo's life over her own freedom. And in the cold mathematics of love and survival, that had been the only choice she could make. Chapter 10. The Golden Cage. Laura woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows and the sound of the lock disengaging. She was still on the floor where she'd fallen asleep, her dress wrinkled, her face creased from pressing against her knees. A woman in a crisp gray suit entered, carrying a tray with coffee and breakfast. She set it on the table without a word, then moved to the closet and began selecting clothes. Mr. Dowling has requested you be ready by 9, the woman said, her voice professionally neutral. The press conference is at 11. I'm Maria, your personal assistant. I'll be helping you prepare. Laura pushed herself to her feet, every muscle aching. I don't need an assistant. Mr. Dowling believes you do. Maria pulled out a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Laura's car. Shower first. I've laid out toiletries in the bathroom. We have 2 hours to make you camera ready. There was no point arguing. Laura was a doll to be dressed and displayed, and Maria was just doing her job. The shower was almost obscenely luxurious, multiple shower heads, perfect water pressure, expensive products that smelled like money. Laura stood under the spray longer than necessary, letting the hot water beat against her shoulders, trying to wash away the feeling of being owned. When she emerged, Maria was waiting with the dress, undergarments, shoes, and jewelry laid out with military precision. She helped Laura into each piece, adjusted hems and necklines, styled her hair into soft waves that looked effortless but probably required extensive training to achieve. The bruise, Maria said, studying Laura's face. I'll cover it, but it might still show in photographs. Mr. Dowling wants the story to be that you were injured protecting yourself from an aggressive customer. You're not to deviate from that narrative. Of course not, Laura said hollowly. Maria's expression softened slightly. He's not a bad man, Miss Yale. I've worked for him for 5 years. He's fair, generous with those loyal to him. And what happens to those who aren't loyal? Maria's face went carefully blank. I wouldn't know. I've always been loyal. She applied makeup with expert precision, covering the bruise until it was barely visible. Perfect. Laura looked at her reflection and didn't recognize herself. The woman in the mirror was polished, expensive, beautiful in an untouchable way. She looked like she belonged in Don Robb Dowling's world. She looked like property. At exactly 9 o'clock, Vincent appeared at her door. Mr. Dowling is waiting downstairs. The house looked different in daylight. Less Gothic cathedral, more modern fortress. Everything was clean lines and expensive materials and strategic sight lines. Laura counted at least 6 security cameras just in the hallway leading to the main staircase. Don Robb waited in what appeared to be a library, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and furniture that looked antique and priceless. He'd cleaned up since last night. Fresh suit, no visible injuries, hair perfectly styled. Only the faint shadows under his eyes betrayed that he'd been beaten and bloody just hours ago. He looked up as she entered, and something shifted in his expression. You look perfect. Maria is very good at her job. Yes, she is. He stood and moved toward her, and Laura forced herself not to step back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I had something made for you. He opened it to reveal a delicate necklace, a simple platinum chain with a single diamond pendant. It was elegant, understated, and probably cost more than most people's houses. Turn around. Laura turned and felt his fingers brush against her neck as he fastened the clasp. The touch was brief, professional, but it still made her skin crawl. In 1 hour, we're going to stand in front of cameras and tell the world that we're in love, Don Robb said quietly, still standing close behind her. They're going to ask how we met. They're going to want details. We need our stories to align perfectly. I know the story. Linda was cruel to me at the restaurant. You defended me. We fell in love. But they'll want more. They'll want to know when I proposed, what I said. They'll want to see chemistry between us. He moved around to face her, and his expression was unreadable. Can you do this, Laura? Can you look at me in front of cameras and make them believe you love me? Laura met his ice blue eyes and thought about Leo. About the medical bills that were now paid. About the treatment that was keeping her brother alive. About the choice she'd made and could never unmake. Yes, she said. I can do this. Prove it. What? Prove it. Right now. Look at me the way you would if you loved me. Laura stared at him, this monster in expensive tailoring, and felt something inside her break. She'd spent her whole life taking care of Leo, sacrificing for Leo, choosing Leo. This was just one more sacrifice. One more performance. She let her expression soften. Let her eyes warm. Let the small smile touch her lips. The kind of smile that said she was happy, that she'd found something precious, that she was exactly where she wanted to be. It was the easiest lie she'd ever told, and the most devastating. Don Robb studied her face for a long moment. Perfect, he said quietly. You're a better actress than I expected. I'm not acting, Laura lied. I'm surviving. There's a difference. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition. Yes, I suppose there is. The press conference was held in a private event space in Manhattan, carefully controlled and orchestrated. Select journalists. Approved questions. Security everywhere. Laura stood beside Don Robb on a small stage, his hand warm against the small of her back, and smiled for the cameras. She told the story they'd rehearsed, the chance meeting, the instant connection, the whirlwind romance. She showed off the ring and blushed when asked about wedding plans. She let Don Robb pull her close and press a kiss to her temple, and she leaned into him like it was the most natural thing in the world. She was perfect. The journalists ate it up. The waitress who tamed the Ice King. The headlines would read, "From rags to romance, Don Robb Dowling's shocking engagement." The love story that changed New York's most dangerous man. Laura smiled through it all, playing her part flawlessly, and felt pieces of herself dying with every flash of the camera. When it was over, Don Robb led her back to the limousine, his hand never leaving her back. Once they were inside, the privacy screen up, he released her immediately. "You did well," he said, pulling out his phone. "Very well. The press is already running positive stories. My PR team is pleased." "Good." Laura stared out the tinted window at the city passing by. "When can I see Leo?" "Tomorrow. I'll have you driven to the hospital. You can spend the afternoon with him." He was typing something, barely paying attention to her. "We have dinner tonight with my mother. She'll want to meet you." "Your mother?" "Yes. She lives in Connecticut. We'll drive up this afternoon." He glanced at her. "She doesn't know the truth about our arrangement. As far as she's concerned, I fell in love and got engaged. Don't disappoint her." "Another performance." "Exactly." He went back to his phone. "She's going to love you. Mothers always love the woman who saves their son." Laura wanted to laugh, wanted to scream. Instead, she just turned back to the window and watched her freedom disappear behind tinted glass. That evening, she met Don Robb's mother, an elegant woman in her 60s who hugged Laura like she was already family and cried over the engagement ring. She told stories about Robb as a child, before his father died, before he became the Ice King. She talked about how worried she'd been, how she'd prayed for him to find someone who could bring warmth back into his life. Laura smiled and played her part, and felt the cage lock tighter around her with every kind word. When they finally returned to the Hudson Valley estate late that night, Laura was exhausted. Not physically tired, emotionally decimated. She'd spent the entire day lying, performing, pretending to be someone she wasn't. Don Robb walked her to her room. He unlocked the door himself, then paused. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For today. For all of it. I know it wasn't easy. Nothing about this is easy." "No, it's not." He looked at her for a long moment. "But you're doing well. Better than I expected. Leo should be proud." "Leo can never know," Laura said fiercely. "That was the deal. He thinks this is real. It is real. Just not the way he thinks." Don Robb stepped back. "Get some rest. Tomorrow you see your brother. Make it convincing." He left, and Laura heard the lock click into place. She walked to the windows, her nightly ritual now, and looked out at the fortress grounds. The diamond ring on her finger caught the moonlight, throwing rainbow refractions across the expensive carpet. Somewhere in Manhattan, Leo was sleeping, safe and cared for, his treatment continuing, his future possible again. Laura pressed her palm against the cold glass and let herself acknowledge the truth. She would do this. She would play this role for a year. She would smile and lie and perform and survive. She would be Don Robb Dowling's perfect fiancée, his redemption arc, his shield and his property. Because that was the price of Leo's life. And in the cold mathematics of love and survival, it was a price she'd pay again and again, no matter what it cost her. Even if it destroyed her. Even if she never got free. The Ice King had claimed his property, and Laura Yale had become exactly what he'd bought her to be, the one person he could trust, precisely because he owned everything she loved. She stood at the window in her golden cage, wearing her diamond shackles, and knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. And the wrong one. Both true at the same time. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It was crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.